The sign language interpreter at the Nelson Mandela Memorial is a fake. The guy standing on stage, shoulder to shoulder with leaders from all around the world, including Barack Obama, is a fraud. As a South African, this concerns me a great deal, and I think it's a classic example of what's wrong with South Africa today. And I'll get into the reasons for that in just a moment, but I first want to speak about this guy and his excuse for sign language. You can't even call it sign language. It's a farce. He was just gesturing randomly, and he's upset the deaf community in South Africa and around the world a great deal. Let me quote quickly for you to start off. He was just gesturing in the air. He didn't interpret at all. He had 0% accuracy. International people were watching it as well, and they all said he was not using any kind of sign language. They all said they don't understand him. He couldn't even say thank you. I have on my Nexus right over here a great link which I highly recommend you check out, but I'll give you a quick glimpse. This is real sign language interpreting, and this is what he was doing. So you can compare the real thing with the farce that he was doing. And I have quite a few different shots. There were quite a few different shots at the site. Please check out the link in the description below. It's a great link. Let me give you a few more quotes. He's a complete fraud. He wasn't even doing anything. There was not one sign there, nothing. He was literally flapping his arms around. He looked like he was trying to swat a few flies away from his face and his head. This fake interpreter has made a mockery of South African Sign Language, and he has disgraced the South African Sign Language interpreting profession. The organizers of the memorial service, and indeed any event, should have contacted organizations who coordinate South African Sign Language interpreting services to secure a professional, trained, experienced interpreter. This comes from DeafSA's National Director, and my previous quotes come from Director of Sign Language Education and Development in Cape Town, and the first quote comes from the spokeswoman for the Deaf Federation of South Africa. I'll leave all the quotes in the description below. But this just gives you a sense of how terrible this whole situation is, how embarrassing it is. And if that's not bad enough, and that is bad enough, but if that weren't bad enough, it turns out that this guy's also a violent schizophrenic. He's admitted on radio that he's a violent schizophrenic. Now, my heart goes out to people with schizophrenia, and the vast majority of people with schizophrenia are not violent, and they deserve to be given a chance to be in society in the same way a normal person is, because they have an illness. But violent schizophrenics are dangerous. They hallucinate, and they're sometimes violent. And he was asked about his schizophrenia, and he was asked about how frequently he's violent. He said he was often violent in the past. So we have a violent schizophrenic on stage with leaders from around the world, including Barack Obama. While on stage, he said he heard angels, and he felt great pressure knowing that people were surrounding him with guns. This is a guy freaking out, panicking on stage with a violent history, who has a very serious medical condition. And this is the best the ANC government can do. They don't check to see who's going to be on stage with Barack Obama. The security violations, the lack of security here, it's unbelievable. It's mind-blowing. It's very, very alarming. And why I said earlier, I think this is a classic example of what's wrong with South Africa today, is the following. Apartheid was a terrible, disgusting, despicable thing. Something that's a great shame in our nation's past. Thank goodness it's over. Thank goodness for Madiba. Nelson Mandela had the courage, the integrity, the compassion, the grace, the goodness to allow for reconciliation to occur. And I'd like to take a moment to thank a truly great man. He makes me deeply proud to be South African. But unfortunately, the current government do not have the same level of integrity, the same caliber of personality that Madiba had. And that would be a record-breaking understatement. But I don't want to speak about the corruption of the current government. I'd like to focus on a particular subject, and that's affirmative action. Now, affirmative action could be a really good thing, because in the past we had a massive section of the population, the majority of the population, that were underprivileged. And it's very important to take proactive measures to get this portion of the population the training, the education, and the resources that they need to have the opportunities that they previously did not have. That's a good thing. That's a great thing. And that's something I support. If you have previously privileged and previously underprivileged. In the case of South Africa, a white guy and a black guy with equal qualifications. It's a good thing to hire the black guy to try and make a better balance in the country. That's a good thing. But unfortunately, the ideal of affirmative action is not the same as the reality of it. The reality is people are not even considered if they are white, oftentimes. I'm not saying this is always the case, but it's too often the case. What's happening way too often is people are hired based on race, not based on qualification. Qualifications are important. So what we have is people who are underqualified or people who are totally unqualified to do very important jobs. And this problem is pervasive across all levels of South African society, government and other. As such, we have decision makers that don't have the know-how, the training, or the experience to make those decisions. Now, I know affirmative action is a very complicated issue, and I support affirmative action if it helps to alleviate racial inequality at the workplace or at school, if it helps to give opportunities to unrepresented groups that would normally not have those opportunities, provided that they are adequately qualified. And even if they are slightly less qualified than their already represented counterparts, it's still understandable to give them such opportunities to help to build up their possibilities. So even in the cases that these unrepresented groups are slightly less qualified, I could be understanding of and even supportive of affirmative action. I am all for diversity. I am all for there being many different races, many different sexes in the workplace, in the universities. That is a good thing. However, I am against affirmative action when people who are really not qualified for a post are hired because they will do a shoddy job or they will resign. They won't be able to do the job. And I'm against affirmative action when it becomes another form of racial discrimination. So it is a complicated issue, and also there are so many people who are qualified of various races and they are undermined because people think they are hired due to affirmative action when it's actually due to their ability. There are people that are very, very qualified and very, very competent in all levels of government in South Africa too. So as much as affirmative action is a problem, and a lot of people who are really not qualified are doing jobs, there are also a great number of people who are very talented, very skilled, and very qualified. And we shouldn't discredit their abilities because we think, oh, they were hired because of affirmative action. Many of them were hired because of their skills. So affirmative action also kind of discredits real ability when there is real ability. So it's very, very complicated.
And I do think that affirmative action can be a really good thing when it's properly implemented. And that's the point that I'm trying to make, is it's the poor implementation of affirmative action that's causing the trouble. There are enough people who are qualified and also meet the requirements in terms of color. And even in the case of this interpreter, the sign language interpreter, there are more than enough qualified sign language interpreters who also meet the color requirements, but they weren't hired. And the reason is it's this complacency, it's this culture that affirmative action has a part in this culture where people are hired just based on race and qualifications aren't properly looked at. There's a complacency. There's a complacency that's kind of grown out of this culture of affirmative action that's completely unjust. And that's what I'm standing against. If affirmative action is properly implemented, it's a good thing. And one other point, what about the minority groups that are not now represented? I think quotas are important. There should be a certain number of people of color and a certain number of people who are white, different genders in the government. But now, the government only looks after one group really. The minority white population is now the victim of this policy, which is also something that's really sad. So as a policy of empowerment, I'm very supportive of affirmative action and black economic empowerment. But as a form of cronyism, I'm very much against it. So it all boils down to the implementation of it. So the point of all of this is this cronyism within the government creates an attitude of complacency, an attitude in which bad hiring decisions are more likely to occur. There's a lack of critical thought, a lack of checking, a lack of carefulness because of the complacency that's resultant from the habitual cronyism.
And the case of the sign language interpreter is a classic example of the sloppiness, the incredible sloppiness with which the government can sometimes hire people. We have a violent, schizophrenic fake that was hired to stand on stage with world leaders, including President Obama. It's unthinkable. It's unthinkable that they could do this. This guy was an embarrassment to the country. It's just come to my attention that this interpreter is also guilty of several crimes. And I'm going to go through the list real quick. In 1994, he was charged with rape. In 1995, with theft. 1997, housebreaking. Malicious damage to property in 1998, as well as attempted murder and kidnapping in 2003. This is the guy that our government let stand on the stage with President Obama. It's completely ridiculous, but in a way I'm glad that this has happened because it brings to light a very important problem with South Africa today. And I don't mean to sound negative. I want to be positive. Mandela gave us that. But in order to be positive, in order to bring the country forward, we have to be real. We have to look at where the problems in the country are so that we can address them, so that we can work together to solve those problems regardless of the color of our skin. I want to end this little video rant with a beautiful, powerful quote by the late and great Madiba, the same quote that Barack Obama delivered at the memorial. I don't have the eloquence of Barack Obama or Madiba, but the quote is powerful nonetheless. During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to the struggle of the African people. I fought against white domination, and I fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony with equal opportunities. It is an ideal for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. Fought against white domination and fought against black domination. Free society in which all persons live together in harmony with equal opportunities. Is that too much to ask? Thanks for listening.